Hey, you know how we asked for listeners' questions a while back?
Yeah, I do recall.
Well, we got some mail, and we got some questions. And I thought since we're, in between shows, today's the day, I was thinking about calling it Out of the Bullpen.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
This is boring anyway.
That looks boring, yeah.
So what's the first one?
Okay. With the constant fear being raised by other countries over the rearmament or expansion of the German army, how did they react to the SA being larger than the German army, given their violent actions? And it is from a Stephen, that's one word, so Stephen White 7763.
Stephen White? The guy who translated Jules Verne into English? I thought he died in 1914. And what's with the 7763?
This is Stephen with a V, not a PH, and I have no idea.
All right. So first we need to give some context. While the SA, the Nazi Party militia, is formidable and terrifying in 1931, it is not the largest paramilitary organization in the Weimar Republic, not even by a long shot. While the SA surpasses 100,000 members this year, outnumbering the Reichswehr, the German army, other paramilitary organizations have already outnumbered it for years.
Take the Stahlhelm, a right-wing, quasi-monarchist organization closely linked to the German National People's Party, the DNVP, with 500,000 members in 1931. Or look at the Reichsbanner Schwarz-Rot-Gold, the paramilitary organization of the Democratic parties. Founded in 1924 as a defense of Republican values and under the slogan of Free Heil, or simply freedom, by 1931 it reports 2.5 to 3 million members. That's what it says.
Yeah, but although, to be fair, though, that is most definitely a lie.
Right.
According to an editor from the Reichsbanner weekly newspaper, these figures are literally invented numbers. In reality, this year, the real number is closer to 900,000. Still, that outnumbers the Reichswehr 9-1, and the large majority of members are veterans.
How did you get that Reichsbanner info? Do you know the editor?
Yeah, Franz. He and I bowled together. He's a decent bowler, actually, when he's sober.
Well, wait a second. How come I never been invited? I'm a good bowler. Oh, I used to be till I messed up my head. My average was up into the 180s. True story. I'm just getting back into it since the pain's finally gone.
Yeah, but you do the 10-pin bowling stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the American version, right?
Oh, you guys do 9-pin?
Yes, the European 9-pin bowling. Kegel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go.
I know, I get it. Okay, anyhow, similar older organizations, such as the Garde Kavallerie Schützendivision, GKSD, actually shaped Weimar Germany from the very beginning. Right after the end of the Great War, the young democratic Germany had to face communist uprisings.
Yeah, in those chaotic early years, the government under President Ebert, with barely 100,000 soldiers, was overwhelmed.
Desperate for help, they turned to the Freikorps, paramilitary units quickly formed by demobilized soldiers, often on the initiative of right-wing officers. Many of these men struggled to return to civilian life post-war and saw themselves as continuing the fight against the inner enemy, leftist revolutionaries.
Like when the GKSD, supported and encouraged by the government, crushed the Spartacist uprising in 1919. Soon, a connection between the Reichswehr, the police, and the Freikorps emerged.
All sorts of ties, personal, professional, political, class, bound the regular army to the wide array of right-wing paramilitary formations that so marred the political landscape of Weimar Germany. Many of the paramilitaries were commanded and staffed by officers who had been cashiered in 1919 and 1920 because of the Versailles Treaty. Regular officers visited and sometimes trained the paramilitaries. Arms flowed to them from army and police stocks.
Now, this is where French and British concerns come into the mix. By 1923, the French occupy the Ruhr, our industrial heartland, and hyperinflation rocks the nation.
Only the total chaos of 1923 and pressure from the Allies led the Reichswehr minister to force the army to withdraw its active support of illegal recruits and paramilitaries, though these activities never entirely ceased.
In essence, the semi-official tolerance and cooperation between the government and some paramilitary organizations became entirely clandestine after that. One example is how the Stahlhelm founded and maintained youth organizations aimed at preparing the next generation of German soldiers. The military tolerated, even welcomed such initiatives as they helped them circumvent the Versailles restrictions.
Fast forward to 1931 and things have changed. The recent Meteoric rise of the Nazi Party causes concern not only at home but also abroad.
The SA, the Red Front fighters, that's the communist militia, and the Reichsbanner turned to the streets of Weimar into an extension of political struggle, settling their disputes in brawls with the government having little to no control over them.
Ernst Röhm, the SA chief from 1931 onwards, wants to turn the SA into a new German army, poised to strike in case of either a Nazi coup or a lawful seizure of power. The SA men had been talking for a long time about becoming the nucleus of a new German People's Army, replacing the professionals with their aristocratic officers.
That is why the outlawing of the SA is talked about frequently, but so far, no concrete action by the government has followed through. The Communist Red Front has been outlawed since 1929, though, because of clashes with the police and riots.
This is also partly why Hitler changes course to his oath of legality strategy in 1930 and 31, ordering the SA to be on their best behavior.
Some people, like the highest military advisor of the German defense minister, Major General Kurt von Schleicher, even see the SA as an opportunity rather than a threat.
My tactics towards Hitler were basically just the same as our tactics in 1918 and 19 in the Army High Command towards the revolution, he said. In 1918, this had meant bringing the SPD into the state, fighting the radical parts, and preventing disturbances from them. The difference was that unlike the Social Democrats, the Nazis were nationalist and militarist. From Schleicher's standpoint, this was a significant plus. I believed, he said, that especially in the stormtroopers there were many good elements in which the army absolutely had an interest for obtaining reserves.
Since you, or rather Schleicher, just mentioned the Army High Command, this reminds me of another question I see here.
Okay.
Since it was very restricted by the Treaty of Versailles, what was the Reichswehr's purpose? As in, what was its doctrine, its war plans? Did it even have war plans? From Sergeant Darth Raptor, the Wise 702.
Someone's cat walk across a typewriter?
Could be.
Okay, anyway, that is a good point, and now that you say it, that fits really well with the current question, so we can answer both.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
So, upwards and onwards.
Excelsior! No, sorry, reflex.
In early years, the paramilitary organizations are key components of the Reichswehr strategy. While Germany sticks to the Versailles 100,000 soldier limit for the army, combined with all those unofficial soldiers, the real fighting strength in the early 20s is between 600 and 800,000.
But there's also the Einwohnerwehr, the citizens' militias, which add another 300,000 or 400,000 soldiers for a time, at least. They also show Entente pressure regarding German rearmament. In 1921, the Inter-Allied Military Control Commission, IMCC, overseeing Germany's adherence to the Versailles stipulations, forces the government to disband such organizations.
That pressure keeps mounting, and the cooperation between government and paramilitaries eventually ceases entirely. Officially. However, not all such organizations are disbanded, and as Schleicher's comment from a moment ago illustrates, they remain an integral part of Germany's military strategy, even the SA.
But that is not all there is to it. As in the case of the Freikorps after 1923, much else is done in secret. You know, Sparty.
What?
You know how outcasts sometimes stick together?
Yes, you mean like, I don't know, the newly formed Soviet Union and the defeated Germany?
See, that is exactly, that's what I was thinking. With the Treaty of Versailles from April 1922, that's what that is, more or less.
Publicly, it's just normalizing relations and trade, but secretly, it's the start of something far beyond that. The Reichswehr and Red Army begin training together, building weapons in Russia, even running flight schools, directly violating Versailles. Germany gets secret training grounds and production facilities, and the Red Army gets access to German technology and doctrine.
French outrage explodes, seeing Rapallo as a German-Soviet plot to undermine their security and the post-Great War European order. And while the Western Entente learns about the real nature of things in 1926, including the continued cooperation with paramilitary organizations, by then, war weariness, plausible deniability, hopes for rapprochement, and internal divisions cause France and Britain to condemn, but not to act.
So, Germany's military is rebuilding under the radar, but this expands far beyond the Treaty of Rapallo and the USSR. Take aviation as an example. The armed forces of Germany must not include any military or naval air force, Versailles stipulates. We already saw that the Treaty of Rapallo works around this, but at home, Germany isn't idle either. Military air force, no, but nobody says anything about civilian aviation.
So Germany uses the development of civil aviation to prepare for the return of military aviation. The military also walks a fine line in other areas. The Deutschland pocket battleship is an example of this.
It follows the restriction of Versailles at 10,000 tons, but to make up for that, it is filled to the gills with modern equipment, guns, targeting systems, and the like, to maximize destructive capabilities.
The German army also isn't just an army. High command knows a time of rearmament will come, so the 100,000 active personnel can be described as an officer's army prepared for large and quick expansion.
As early as January 1921, von Seeckt, head of the Army Command, let it be understood that he regarded it as his duty to form the Reichswehr into the nucleus of a future larger Wehrmacht, which would no longer be subject to Versailles. In 1928, the Defense Ministry obtained cabinet approval of plans for a mobilizable army 16 divisions strong, as well as some stockpiling of war materials.
And who are they preparing to fight? In 1924, a paper to the officers at the Reich Defense Ministry entitled Thoughts of the War of the Future was based on the conviction that the Reich's continued existence and development could only be secured for the long term by renewed conflict with France.
And also Poland, because of the German territories ceded to create modern Poland, something the government has never accepted.
France and Britain are aware of this to a degree. But bear in mind, it's not like Germany advocates this publicly. This really is hidden under a mountain of half-truths and lies, carefully crafted statements, and diplomatic posturing.
Diplomatic posturing. Indy, this reminds me of yet another question we have today.
Okay, shoot.
What were the reactions of the other European governments during this time period? Were they subtly trying to influence German politics, especially nations like France and Great Britain, who had interest in keeping Germany down? By funny sign, Eric 6733?
Okay, I'll accept that. So you want to turn this into a triple header, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, then let's continue. Also, to give a complete answer to Stephen White, international relations is the name of the game. So Britain and France know at least some of what the paramilitaries, the Nazis as a party, the Reichswehr, and the German government are up to. France fears the resurgence of Germany and yet another attack.
After wars breaking out in 1870 and 1914, there are still an awful lot of people alive who remember 1870, the French are vigilant and act accordingly. The beginning of the construction of a fortification system, the Maginot Line, along the entire border of France, shows that they mean business.
But, and this is a big but, that does not mean that France is purely hostile to Germany, and neither is Britain for that matter. Just take the Young Plan, changes to the reparations payment scheme meant to ease Germany's burden. Not possible without France or Britain.
Exactly. And their reasons are more complicated than just wanting to punish Germany or keep it weak. Both France and Britain need Germany to survive economically so it can actually pay reparations, which they in turn need to pay their own war debts, especially to the US.
On top of that, the Allies are terrified that if Germany's economy collapses, extremists like the Nazis or the communists will take over, threatening all of Europe. U.S. Secretary of State Henry Stimson promised he would do all he could to save the Germany of Dr. Brüning from the other Germany. His British counterpart also believed it was necessary to prop up Brüning to keep the Nazis out, and they pressed this view on their governments.
So, Stephen White, here's your answer. While the Entente does not explicitly do something against the SA, they are worried about paramilitary groups generally and specifically about the Nazis taking power.
Moreover, Britain also wants to avoid another crisis on the continent, while France, despite its fears, sometimes sees cooperation as a means of keeping Europe stable. So the Young Plan and even the Hoover Moratorium are really about protecting their own interests, stabilizing Europe, and one more important thing.
Financial arrangements in interwar Europe were really about security and, in particular, keeping Germany in line. So long as Germany was constrained by reparations, it could not threaten its neighbors.
So, while them wanting to keep Germany down is a bit of an over-exaggeration, keeping Germany fiscally bound and controlled with someone like Brüning and not the Nazis in charge is pretty much right on the money.
Rearmament, of course, plays a part in all this. For example, just last episode, we covered how Germany is desperately looking for new loans and how Britain and France countered that if it wants new loans, Germany needs to make concessions, like the Deutschland pocket battleship officially accepting its new eastern borders or shutting down the customs union project with Austria.
All of these fit with the general idea. Shutting down the Deutschland ship means limiting rearmament. Abandoning the customs union keeps Germany economically bound, and officially accepting the eastern border with Poland maintains the post-war territorial settlement.
So, in essence, yes, France and Britain are trying to influence Germany. One last thing about this. Chancellor Brüning isn't a fool. He is aware of this to a degree, and he knows how to turn it to Germany's advantage, at least sometimes.
Take rearmament. While Germany is silently rearming, towing the line of Versailles and crossing the line behind the scenes, it is still not in great shape, militarily speaking.
A series of studies in the winters of 1927-28 and 1928-29 occupied themselves primarily with the possible form and course of a war against Poland. The Foreign Office representative commented, in short, that a war against Poland could be waged for a short time only and with further German territorial losses.
But Brüning sees a way to turn this into an advantage. He joins others who openly demand further international disarmament. After all, Germany's got nothing to lose. If others disarm, well, that only improves Germany's relative position of strength.
And if others do not disarm, it gives the German demands for rearmament more weight.
This reminds me of another question, and one last one, okay?
Okay, triple header into a quadfecta. We are on fire today. What else do we have?
Okay, what we have. Since we're talking about Brüning's policies and all, what was the internal politics of the SPD, Social Democrats, and Centrum, Catholic Conservatives, during this time period? This is from Emir Alpis Mail 748.
Ooh, an emir?
Yeah, I never heard of this particular emir, but it's cool to know we got Middle Eastern leaders as listeners. Anyway, the internal politics of Centrum for the moment are more or less the internal politics of Germany, since, Brüning is the chancellor and he's also the leader of Centrum.
So Brüning's primary domestic strategy in 31 revolves around stabilizing Germany's economy, which is on the brink of collapse.
That is why he's desperately pushing deflationary policies, slashing budgets, cutting wages, raising taxes to try and get the crisis under control. Some say he has other options, but one thing is sure, he does not have much room to maneuver. Either way, politically, he's forced to rule by presidential decrees because he simply cannot piece together a stable majority anymore.
Working with the Nazis or communists is impossible, although Centrum, at the very least, maintains contact with the Nazis to see if that might change, and even the moderate center parties aren't reliable.
On top of all that, President Hindenburg and the conservative elites refuse outright to let the Social Democrats back into government, effectively killing any chance of reviving the old Weimar coalition of SPD, Centrum, and German Democratic Party, the DDP. Ironically, though, Brüning's cabinet is still dependent on the SPD.
The SPD is in a pickle. It is the largest party in Germany, yet a return to government is not happening. The last election also made one thing painfully clear. The SPD has everything to lose while the Nazis and the communists have everything to gain. That is why they have set out on their path of tolerance.
Don't get us wrong, the SPD could topple the Brüning government easily enough. It was the SPD that caused the collapse of the last government, with SPD member Müller resigning as chancellor in 1930 because of irreconcilable differences in the previous coalition government, mostly centered around austerity.
That's precisely why the SPD does not want to risk another election. They saw the Nazis soar, the communists succeed, and themselves and other democratic parties suffer. So they are currently more or less controlled opposition for Brüning. This also means that both Centrum and SPD are dependent on each other while technically being poised against each other in parliament.
So to briefly summarize everything that we have just explained today.
Why no Allied panic over SA outgrowing the army? Reichsbahn, about 900,000, and Stahlhelm, about 500,000, and others already dwarf the 100,000 Reichswehr. At the moment, worry centers on Germany's whole paramilitary jungle and the Nazis' electoral surge, not SA headcounts in particular.
Reichswehr's purpose and strategy? A 100,000 cadre school grooming officers, guiding covert arms work and militias ready to balloon for a future clash with France or Poland.
How do France and Britain react? They use purse and paperwork. Reparation tweaks, loan leverages, sanction threats, disarmament talks to keep Berlin solvent yet shackled. Pressure, not gunfire.
And what are SPD and Centrum politics? Bruning rules by decree. SPD supports to dodge elections that could empower Nazis or communists, binding both parties in wary codependence. We got all of them?
Not quite. There is one more. Could you describe the full voting process for a German citizen? How more violent parties like the Nazis and the communists influence the voters at each stage? From a nuke the Nate lore?
Nuke the Nate lore.
That's an explosive name, though I'm not sure what it means.
Well, this shouldn't be a problem at all to answer. Okay, to vote, you have to appear on the local Wahlerliste, the voters list. All Germans 20 and over qualified, far beyond the old male-only Kaiser-era rules. If you are away, a simple Wahlschein lets you vote elsewhere.
Polls open Sunday, 8 to 1800 in schools, town halls, or church rooms. Inside, you pick one party on a single consolidated ballot, with parties' pre-ranked candidate lists, so seats are filled straight down that order. Votes are counted aloud on the spot, forwarded up the district ladder, and every roughly 60,000 valid votes delivers one Reichstag seat, keeping representation strictly proportional.
Extremists can't yet fiddle with the math, so they bully the spaces in between. During the 1930 election, the SA, or the Red Front squads, they rip down posters, wreck rival meetings, and engage in violent street clashes. Everything to create a climate of fear and influence the election that way. But the war for votes remains firmly removed from the actual voting booths as the police protect them. For the moment, the Republic still knows how to defend itself.
And that's it for today.
It is.
If you enjoyed us answering your questions, then let us know.
And if you didn't, don't. And no, really, let us know. And if you have more questions, you can just put them under this video and we will get to them in another round of Out of the Bullpen.
To get the most accurate news from in and around Germany, don't forget to tune in to the Weimar Wire. It is you who enable us to cover the events that shape Germany's path into the future.
To become a part of all of that, join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com.
Excelsior!